Welcome, good evening, and thank you all for being here. And thank you to the City of Port Angeles for allowing us to use this facility. I also want to thank the members of the League of Women Voters Voter Service Committee for their efforts in organizing this event. First off, can you all hear me? Okay. If at any time you cannot hear me or one of our candidates, please raise your hand and we'll try to scoot closer to the microphones. My name is Vicki Rudin. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, and I'm obviously your moderator this evening. The League of Women Voters is a 98-year-old national nonpartisan organization whose purpose is to encourage local citizens to register to vote, become well-informed voters, and participate in all levels of government. The League does not support or oppose candidates, factions, or political parties. The views expressed here tonight are those of the candidates and not of the sponsors of the debate. The League, however, does act in support of or in opposition to selected governmental issues which its members have studied. You can find more information about the League on the membership table in the lobby or by going to our website, which is on the banner there. We will be following the agenda you were given when you came in. Is there anyone who didn't happen to get an agenda? Well, we don't have a lot of spares, so if you could look on with the person sitting next to you, that would be very helpful.
There's some over here.
Raise your hand, though, if that doesn't work for you. But please try to share with the person sitting next to you. Thank you. Before we begin, let's deal with a few important matters. First, please turn off all cell phones. I'll remember to do it myself. And if you have any other device that makes noise, please turn it off as well. Please note that there are restrooms out in the lobby to your right of the entrance door. Also, a word about video recording. No non-league audio or video recording devices of any kind are permitted during this forum unless prior permission has been received. As you can see, the League is recording the forum, and the video will be posted on the League's website in a few days. Our forum tonight will be in 3 parts. The first panel will feature the candidates for Director of Community Development. The next panel will be the candidates for Prosecuting Attorney. The third panel will be candidates for County Sheriff. Each panel will follow the same basic outline. The candidates will make brief opening statements. Next, we'll take questions from the audience, and then the candidates will make their closing statements. We hope you will be thinking of the questions you want to ask the candidates as you listen to their opening statements. If you need a card to write on, hold up your hand and a League member will provide one. To make the most of our time, I ask you to kindly refrain from applauding or making any other noises which in any way interrupt our speakers. I'll be sure to give you a chance at the end of each panel to give a round of applause to the candidates. League members wearing name tags are located around the room. Please signal to them if you need assistance in any way. Our timers this evening are Margie Whitmore, Ellen Fetchett, and Walt Johnson. They're down here in the front row. Their job is to make sure we stay within the time limits that have been established for each segment of our forum. Your agenda provides summary information on the responsibilities of each office that is being discussed tonight. Therefore, I'm not going to take time to repeat what you have before you. And probably you'll get a good understanding of the responsibilities of the office as you listen to the candidates. All right, Candidates for Director of Community Development. The candidates are Mary Ellen Winborn, the incumbent, and challenger Julie Gardiner. Both candidates, in the order they filed for office, will be given up to 2 minutes for their opening remarks. We have asked the candidates to introduce themselves by covering the following information: their qualifications for serving in this office, why they are running for this office, and what are their goals for the first year in this term of office. Candidates, please keep your eye on our timers so you can gauge your time. We'll begin with Mary Ellen Winborn.
Let's see. Good evening. I'm Mary Ellen Winborn, and I'm running for re-election to win this time, this race, this election. I have a professional degree in architecture, much like that of an engineer, a CPA, or a lawyer, from Mississippi State University. I graduated on time with honors while raising my daughter as a single parent. I'm also a licensed Washington State architect. I have 3.5 years of experience as your community development director, 18 years as a small business owner, Winborn Architects, 8 years working for architects and planners, and 5 years as an offshore process pipe draftsman. So that's a total of 34 years of professional development experience. 26 of those years have been in Clallam County. My first highlight of community involvement is being chosen to be a board officer of the North Olympic Healthcare Network. My second highlight is serving as Monday Musicale since 2010. It's like having 75 grandparents. I have a little over 3.5 years of experience as your DCD director. In this time, we have organized issues, we've had organizational issues and cleaned up. We fully staffed code enforcement with a hearings examiner. We've processed over 24 ordinances, including rezones, compared to 19 ordinances that the 2 previous administrations had. Last year, we reviewed last year we reviewed and approved over 1,020 building permits. And this year we're in line to exceed that. That doesn't sound much to me like this department is in shambles. Why am I running for this office? To have consistency and predictability. Also, you'll have to wait to find out a little bit more.
You can finish your sentence, Mary. We aren't that smart.
We're focusing on economic development and affordable housing in the next year, and there's money in the 2019 budget for both of these because you can't do one without the other. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Julie Gardiner. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Julie Gardiner, and I am running for DCD Director. I have a master's in land use planning. I've been in the community for 32 years. I've worked for tribes, engineering, and surveying firms. I am currently managing a law firm for the past 10 years that specializes in land use law. I have sat on several public boards and commissions. I believe that balance between development versus quality of life is at the core of community development and should be at the core of everything that the DCD does. I want to bring law, property rights, and environmental protection to the forefront of DCD priorities. During the first year, I expect that I will address the housing crisis by researching the economics in the hardest hit populations and reduce the regulatory barriers to alternative housing proposals and provide guidance to the county commissioners on the same. I will create an enforcement program as well that stops the destruction of our neighborhoods and threatens our community's health and safety. And when I say health and safety, I am talking about serious matters, namely the incredible number of RVs squatting on property throughout neighborhoods and throughout the county, dumping raw sewage on the ground for which no enforcement has occurred. And what it means is shutting them down in some fashion or another. Yes, we have health and human safety, and we have tragic human situations in those settings as well. But we cannot allow our health and safety issues to be set aside in favor of voluntary compliance and social service programs when we are talking about property rights, law, and environmental protection for ourselves and our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will take as many questions as possible from you, the audience. Please come to the microphone. We have one over there. Is there a microphone on that side too, or not? Nope, just the one there, okay. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and specify whom your question is for. You will have up to 30 seconds to ask your question. Our timers will hold up the stop sign if you use up that time. A league member will hold the microphone for you. Don't attempt to get it out of their hand. We have a reason for that. The candidates will have up to 1 minute to answer each question. So please consider this time limit when crafting your question. It may help you to stay within your 30 seconds if you write your question down beforehand and then read it when it's your turn at the mic. If you do not wish to come to the mic, give your written question to one of our members and it will be read aloud by a league member for you. The candidates will be given up to 1 minute to answer each question. Both candidates will have an opportunity to respond to all questions, even those directed at a specific candidate. I will then give each candidate the opportunity to respond to or rebut their fellow candidates' answers. They will be given up to 30 seconds for a brief response or rebuttal, or if they wish, they may waive their chance to respond, which means we get to more of your questions. I expect there will be approximately 30 minutes for audience questions and candidate responses, but this is an estimate. We will see how things move along. If we run out of time before you get your question answered, we encourage the candidates to remain after this forum so that you may speak to them directly. While you are coming to the mic, I'll kick off this part of the forum with our first question. And this is for both the candidates. I will start with Mary Ellen. Is there a role the Department of Community Development can play in addressing the issue of homelessness in our communities?
I believe yes, there is, but it's kind of in an indirect way, and it's about meeting some of the affordable housing needs for the income bracket of, say, between $40,000 and $50,000, because that's the a family of four earning $47,000 a year could be considered for affordable housing. So if we can get, which we can do this by making sure that we develop some of the properties that can develop more densely, like say the Gales Addition area. There's areas in Carlsberg that can develop more densely, so we can get the infrastructure in place and a developer can come in and build in those areas.
Julie?
First of all, we need to understand the nature of the problem. We see it, but what is in it? What is it defined by? There is a difference between homelessness and unaffordable housing. We have created the unaffordable housing issue by virtue of not being able to process subdivisions in the UGA or anywhere else in the county. We have evidence on the ground now to prove that. We've had unenforcement for 8 years on any front in regard to squatting RVs, various other alternative housing. We need to open up the barriers to alternative types of housing, including RVs as a permanent living situation and where they should be. Tiny homes, single occupancy residences, that's also known as a boarding house. There are alternatives out there that we have not developed and do not have a proper permitting process for. These things need to be addressed and addressed immediately. That's what we have long-range planners for. This is the kind of research that long-range planners do. Feasibility studies, economic analysis, figuring out who's where in the community. We can do it.
Mary Ellen, you have an opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal if you wish.
Well, it's just not true that we cannot process subdivisions in the county. That is just flat out not true. And RVs are recreational vehicles. They are vehicles like a car. The Department of Community Development does not permit vehicles on foundations, we permit buildings on foundations, and tiny homes are on wheels, and again, that's not something that we permit. So it's not really something that we can address. The best that we could do in affordable housing is designate an area that potentially, like an RV park, that's where you can have people living. And there are plenty of places in the county that you can have an RV park, so they don't have to be in everybody's backyard.
Julie, you have an opportunity for another 30 seconds.
The fact that we cannot process subdivisions in this county. The last subdivision to be processed went through the process 3 times with complete support by staff and failed 3 times miserably in front of the hearing examiner. And it is more a matter of being able to release and resolve conflicts within the permitting process that will allow subdivisions to be created in the UGA and in the urban areas that is going to solve this problem. The market has been damaged for 8 years, badly.
All right, a question from the audience.
Yes, my name is Scott Lang, place in Clallam Bay. I think this question is for Julie. And then afterwards, Mary Ellen can give a little insight. She'll know what I'm talking about here because I've had a lot of dealing with the DCD over the last 12 years. And as I listened to your opening statement, I was kind of shocked at the aggressive nature of it. And what struck me was that it's almost totally unrealistic in the political environment that exists within the county. And I'd like you to explain to me, how are you going to work with other elected officials to do the agenda that you just described?
Go ahead, Julie.
Basically, we need all divisions in the county to work in concert, but that doesn't mean that DCD requires other people to do their job. It's DCD's job to establish the proper procedures and figure out how to use the other departments for the skills and the resources that they have to offer. But DCD is the coordinating model that then draws strength from each of the other divisions. You have to be able to use all of the divisions effectively, and that is why the second degree, the 3 years beyond the undergraduate degree, is necessary to learn how to do that, how to work the engine that is the community development system. Comprehensive planning is a profound economic engine if it's used properly.
So I believe the question is, how have I worked with different departments? Could you repeat the question?
It was impossible to get any code enforcement until you came into the department. There have been a lot of changes since you joined. I think it would be instructive for this audience to understand the political realities of getting things done within county government.
Yes. It's like anything. I mean, you know, every child knows which parent to ask for what they need, right? So we all have to realize when we can and when we can't do something, and I think that's very important. And when I want to get something done in my house, if my husband's not on board, I don't force him to do it. I get on board with things that I know that other people are going to get on board with. That generates a lot of momentum, and you get things done like that. So thank you.
Julie, you can have another 30 seconds for a rebuttal or further comment.
No, I think we should go on to the next questions.
Mary Ellen, you have an opportunity for another 30 seconds if you wish.
I believe that it's very important to have a good working relationship with all the different electeds and the department heads. I spend time talking to each commissioner because I want to let them know what's going on in DCD, because in any other circumstances, the commissioners would be in charge of DCD, but since they're not, I think it's important that we have open lines of communication all the time, because that's how things happen and that's how we get things done.
We'll take our next question over here.
Yes, this is for Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen, could you explain the difference between a hotel and a bed and breakfast? relative to county code?
Yes. Our bed and breakfast codes say that you have up to 5 rooms for overnight accommodations with that does not distract from the residential appearance of the building. Well, once you go beyond 5 in the building codes, it becomes a hotel. And then it has more restrictions than it has with 5 or less rooms. But 5 or more rooms, it becomes a hotel. You have to put exit stairs in, you have to put fire suppression systems in, you have to put just any hotel that you've been in. So after 5 rooms, that's what the building code says. You need a fire suppression system like you would have in this building. So it's much more restrictive, because a single family residence, that's the least restrictive building that we have. So that's the least safe building that we have in our communities. So when you start to put people that don't know what other people are doing in other rooms, you need to have better restrictions. So that's the difference.
Julie, you have a minute.
The legal distinction between the two is that a B&B must be owner-occupied. Hotels, motels, etc. need not be owner-occupied. Of the types of models that we have in the county, hotels, motels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, bed and breakfast are the only one that is saddled with a room limitation, okay? And that is unfair to the playing field. And there, you can either raise the limit or to make it more competitive, or you can do away with the limit altogether. Bed and breakfast industry has brought code to the DCD that they believe will work well from other states, and they have met with zero support whatsoever. It is an unequal economic playing field out there, and specifically harming the owner-occupied families.
Mary Ellen, you can provide another 30 seconds.
There are plenty of places in our community, in the incorporated areas of Port Angeles, in Sequim, and in the unincorporated urban growth areas of Sequim and Port Angeles and even Forks, that hotels can be built in because they have services. That's what you need when you're going to have to put a fire suppression system in like that. When you're talking about our rural areas, you don't have sewer, you don't have PUD water. You have septic systems and wells, and that taxes those areas out in the rural area, in the rural community, as well as the Growth Management Act doesn't want us to develop out in the rural areas like that.
Thank you. Julie, you have another 30 seconds.
We have a very specific bed and breakfast industry out there, and it's not despoiling wells, and it's not despoiling farmlands. These are generally older couples who have acquired a lifestyle that has a cultural and guest host relationship that is very different from hotels, motels, and other kinds of commercial establishments. This is a huge distinction for the quality of life and the character of our communities here.
Thank you. Question over here.
Yes, I'm Susan Mullen from Sequim, and there's a lot of ways to come at this issue, but I'm just going to do it head on this way. So this is for Julie. I'm as good as the information in the Port Angeles Daily News, the Peninsula Daily News, so we'll see if this is correct. My understanding is that you run the law practice for your husband. Your husband has brought a suit against Mary Ellen over the property that we were just more or less discussing. And I don't understand, number one, why this isn't a conflict of interest for you, and number two, how you wouldn't bring that agenda in as you just actually referred to it, should you win this position. And there are a lot of people that don't want what seems like a hotel next door to them. And one of them is a neighbor who is a friend of mine. And
Your time is up.
Thank you for answering.
Well, a little error in your information there. No, we do not represent Judy Lee and the bed and breakfast for Sequim Bay. Neither did we file the lawsuit for that either. We simply provided local counsel, which ended in December of 2016, I might add. And the issues that I have there don't have to do with this huge out-of-scale proposal. It has to do with the fact that building permits are supposed to be completed within 2 to 3 weeks, generally speaking, and this one drug out for 6 months and required 3 law firms. We were simply a local council. In order to get an opinion one way or another. And oh, by the way, that permit is alive and well out there. It didn't go away. Nobody's been saved from anything. It was vested. It was made right and whole by our current director. Yes, there's a lawsuit that has her name on it, not mine, but nonetheless, it also means that this permit is alive and well, and when that's resolved, it will go forward, and you will likely get it built because it was deemed complete.
Mary Ellen, you have a minute.
Yes. The lawsuit was the developer basically brought the plans, put them on the counter, said that it was an R3 occupancy, and our building official said, no, it's an R1 occupancy, and that means it's a hotel. Once that was done, a lawsuit was issued because they didn't believe that it was R1 occupancy. It went to the Board of Appeals twice, and it went to the Superior Court in Kitsap County, and they also ruled that it was an R1 occupancy. And Mr. Miller, he was the local representative for the law firm that's been suing us. So, and he also does other land use issues with the county. So it is a conflict of interest, or it could be a conflict of interest. It's not now, but it could be a conflict of interest because that's what he says he does. He says he does land use, and so that would be a pretty bad situation.
Julie, you have about 30 seconds if you wish to add anything.
What can you say? Everyone has to make a living in a small town, and I saw that application first person, and it was one of the worst applications I've ever seen. It would never have gotten off my desk as being complete. There were handmade sketches, there were narrative letters describing the proposal that were in contradiction with each other, so you couldn't tell exactly what it was that they were going to do. For that reason, it was never complete and should never have been stamped complete, because it's still alive and well, and the neighborhood will experience it if she prevails in court.
Mary Ellen, 30 seconds.
My determination was that it was an R1 occupancy. Hotels are prohibited in that zone, and that was it. And she continues to try to sue us on many different things. So that was the decision that was made. It was an R1 occupancy, a hotel prohibited in that zone. I don't know how you can get any clearer than that.
Our next question over here.
Yes, we have a question from the audience. I think it's Lisa Decker, and it's pertaining to the same subject. And the question is really directed at you, Julie.
Okay.
Should Julie Gardiner recuse herself from any community development business involving current or former clients of the Greg Miller law firm?
Well, obviously we would. I mean, Craig is nearly 70 years old and is looking to retire. He's 69, he'll be 70 this year. And as far as recusing myself, it's not an issue. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer and I don't represent them. I consult like any other engineering and surveying subcontractor that we use, and we use many, many subcontractors. That is my role, aside from managing the firm, the personnel, the finances, and everything else that goes on. So no, I don't see a conflict of interest there. And specifically because we're knowledgeable does not mean that we should recuse ourselves. And nobody has touched that file since December of 2016.
Mary Ellen, do you wish to comment?
No, thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to the next question. Over here.
Okay, we have also a question that came in from the audience on the card. It is from Craig Miller. And you both discussed this to some extent, but we'll bring it up again and you can decide whether you want to elaborate. This is for both candidates. There are too many RVs used as residences in residential zones. How would you handle this problem?
Mary Ellen, we'll have you take this first.
We fully staffed code enforcement now. We have a caseload of about 50 RVs because this has happened over time. When I first moved here 26 years ago, the county just wasn't very developed. Now it is. So now that's putting a lot of pressure on us to clean it up. And so, so there are plenty of RVs. We need to introduce an RV ordinance. We need to figure it out. It needs to go through the Planning Commission. It needs to go to the commissioners. We need a lot of public input. And when we bring that ordinance forward, I would ask anyone in this room to come and input what they think and how they think that RVs should be handled in this community, because there are a lot of them that are in rural residential areas next to single-family homes. And we really don't have anything in place to do that. I mean, when there's more than one RV, we can stop that, but one RV, we don't have anything in place for that.
Julie?
Well, there's no question that RVs are permeating our single-family residences, and our single-family neighborhoods are one of our preferred living locations. But things have changed since the Great Recession. Recreational vehicles have become a standard permanent living situation, whether they run or not. And if they don't run, that can create even more problems than ever. I do firmly believe that we need to get them out of the single-family neighborhoods. However, there is this issue about ADUs, accessory dwelling units. If they're permanent living situations, are there environments where they can be used, in fact, as a limited ADU? That's a possibility. However, my concern is the lack of enforcement on the ones that are on the ground, and that requires abatement orders, not voluntary compliance. Abatement is when you enter and resolve a situation that has been going unaddressed for years and years and years, like sewage being dumped raw on the ground, untreated, by hundreds of RVs.
Mary Ellen, you have
Okay.
30 seconds.
Ms. Gardner doesn't understand the hearings examiner process and voluntary compliance. We try to get voluntary compliance with people. If they're not going to give us the voluntary compliance, then they go in front of a quasi-judicial hearings examiner process. And he helps them even more try to determine when they're going to be able to, say, get out of the situation that they're in. If they can't, then it has to move on to Superior Court. So there is a process.
Julie?
Quasi-judicial is the important word there. What that means is outside of the judicial range. It's not a judgment. It is a half measure. The judgments that we need come from Superior Court, and only from Superior Court, because we are talking about people, land, property rights, and threats to health and safety. This is critical. Again, voluntary compliance is a social education program about how to live better. It is not enforcement.
Our next question.
Ed Bowen, Rural District 3. And my question is going to be trying to get your ideas. So this is in regards to the new or changes to county regulations that affect development. How do you intend to lessen the burden on the landowners of barring the onus created by those regulations? And just some thinking to this, think along the lines of the financial onus created by these regulations to achieve their goal, especially regulations that go beyond the scope of an RCW or our county charter.
And who did you wish to answer?
So it's an idea question.
Okay.
What's your ideas?
We'll start with Julie on this.
Onerous regs are a major concern around here. I'd like to see to open up the prospects for alternative septic systems, for example, ones that work, that are used in other communities and island communities and places where environmental sensitivity is critical. Going beyond the requirements of the RCWs, that is when you get into the community values aspect of comprehensive planning. There is an essential quality that we need: ongoing involvement, not special interest and or occasional involvement, in order to be able to provide that kind of input as to how, if we're going to go over what the RCWs require, then what exactly are we getting out of it, and is it truly worth the economic offset? Because it's always about costs and benefits, and money matters. Needless to say, we can drive our development into the ground, which has been happening, and there is a cost in all ways. Affordable housing, loss of jobs, etc.
Mary Ellen?
When you know the rules, you can really figure out how to make them work. And one of the things that people can do, and we encourage them to do, if they're building a small, modest house, they can do conventional construction. You don't have to get it engineered. There's a format in place to do that. We can always, when people come and talk to us about what they plan on developing, we can just help them through the process, because we all know how to do it in the department, and we can just help them. You know, when you know people's goals, dreams, and desires, you can help them get there with the rules you have.
Julie, 30 seconds more.
Still, overregulation is devastating to development, to personal goals, and to our economy. Overregulation is an example of what has been floated and died a quiet death in front of the commissioners of a landscaping ordinance that added $20,000 to $30,000 onto anybody with a new or expanding business in the Carlsberg area. To what end? There was no economic analysis. That has been a complete lack in most any of the overreach in our code application. We need environmental protection.
Mary Ellen?
Sometimes when people say over-regulations, it's just because they don't understand the regulations and how to work with the regulations. I've done over 300 development permits, or 300 development projects in the county. You can't get those done if you don't understand how to get to the regulations. It's not hard once you know how to do it.
Our next question.
Yes, it's Norma Turner, and I may have read this wrong. I thought I read in one of your earlier debates that you talked about this office returning to being an appointed office versus elected. Will you just discuss that whole thing, please?
Who would you like to have answer this first?
Both.
Okay, we'll start with Mary Ellen.
You know, I was very frustrated with it being an elected office. That's why I ran for the position in the first place, because I didn't like having to go to the community development director, that was the building official, that was the fire marshal, and try to get a question answered. It would take up to 2 weeks just to get a question answered, and you couldn't even work on your project if you didn't do that. So it can be bad, but it can be good too. But I think that you need one person or one group of people that you go to answer your question, and that should be your county commissioners. I love this job. I love doing this job. I am very happy doing this job. I don't think I could be an appointed director, but I really do like being an elected director. But I know all kind of community development directors for other parts of the state, and I've talked to them in length about the whole situation, and it can work either way, but it's more risky with it being elected.
Julie?
We are the only elected DCD in the country, and there's a reason for that. DCD directors have been required to have master's degrees since the late 80s, mid-80s. Needless to say, if there were, in fact, an appointed position and we would be applying for credentials, there will be only one person sitting here, because a bachelor's degree in any science is simply not adequate to approach the complexity and the range of professions that this particular position has to interface seamlessly with. So needless to say, I do think that I am the most qualified and probably the only qualified person in this race to do this job. We have had 16 years of an example of what a lack of qualification has given us in terms of land use development in the county, and every one of you can see it in your neighborhoods. We all are being set upon by nuisances and by risk factors and health and safety threats.
30 seconds, Mary Ellen.
I don't only have the proper degree to do this job, I also have 3.5 years of experience doing this job. And I have experience since 1992 doing development permits. I've worked on both sides of the counter. I mean, how much better experience can you have? I mean, once you get a degree, you have to have experience, real life experience to do a job. And Ms. Gardiner just doesn't have any of that. I can't make it up.
Julie?
Building permits are the tail of the dog, for heaven's sakes. There are at least 4 primary functions of the DCD that involves long-range planning, enforcement, current land use planning, and then building permits. And building permits are the very, very last thing that ever goes on in the division. And the idea of trying to interpret land use code or uses like through the zoning code with a building code, because that's where your experience is incompetent. Sorry.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? One more over there?
Yes, we have one from the audience. There's no name associated with it, and you touched on this one too a little bit, and it's for both of you. Both of you have said that you think the Director of Community Development should be appointed. What do you think the qualifications should be?
We'll start with you, Julie.
Well, obviously, I've just stated that. You must have, first, a degree within one of the disciplines, which is architecture, engineering, sociology, economics, anthropology for that matter. And then you need the advanced degree that tells you and teaches you how to use other professions in detail as part of the process. And if you don't have that training, you're only going to be a one-trick pony, and that's basically what we've been looking at for the last 16 years. And that is people who have enough skill to manage one piece of the system, but they cannot make the machine go. And yes, I do have plenty of experience. Public boards and commissions, with engineering firms, with tribal governments, which are lovely because they're a smaller microcosm that helps you early on get a handle on the big picture of things. And I have taught comprehensive land use planning theory. I can see the big picture.
Mary Ellen?
The list that Julie listed, that's usually what, that's the list of acceptable degrees to be usually a DCD director, which I have an architectural degree. It's a professional degree. It has a thesis shoved into it. Either you have a 4 or 2 year degree, or you have a 5-year degree. Mine's a 5-year degree. It's just as comparable as a 4 to undergraduate with a graduate degree. So, because that's what you need to sit for your licensing test. So I do have all the education, all the classes that a person that has a master's has. It just got all shoved into 5 years. And out of 150 students that started in my class, there were only 10 of us that graduated on time. And that's why they started making it a 4-2 program, because most people couldn't get through the process in 5 years. So I do have all the theory, but I have the real life experience. That's what you have to have. When you have theory, you have to put it into practical application. And that's what I've been doing for the last almost 30 years.
Do you wish another 30 seconds?
The proof is in the pudding. Look around. Look at your neighborhoods. Look at our cities. Look at our affordable housing crisis. Look at our lack of enforcement, and look at our lack of long-range perspective on where all of this is going, if anywhere. Have you gotten the services your tax dollars have paid for? Any of you? I haven't. And I'm concerned with this, particularly on the enforcement issue.
Mary Ellen, 30 seconds.
I just don't think I have anything else to say about that.
Well, we have used up a half hour of questions. You have already asked one, right? This gentleman. Okay, well, we're going to call it off at this point and go to our candidates' closing statements. In this case, we will now reverse the order from the opening statements and begin with Julie Gardiner. You have 2 minutes.
I believe the balance between development versus quality of life is at the core of community development, should be at the core of all that the DCD does. Land development is essential for housing, for jobs, and for environmental restoration. I believe in less regulation, use of performance standards, and better enforcement. Don't make new laws if you cannot enforce the ones you have. And I will work with citizens to develop their projects, not against them. That does not mean it's a free range out there. We must protect this glorious piece of dirt that we're all living on. It's the mother, and it's what we've got. And if we destroy it, we probably aren't going to make it back in our lifetime or our children's. I want to be a professional voice of reason for balance and protection of property rights, environmental protection, and fair and equal access to the law in this system. Thank you.
Mary Ellen Winborn.
When you're an elected official, and particularly when you're running for office, sometimes you Google yourself just to see what's out there because you never know what Paul Gottlieb's up to. So I do that, and this book shows up, Building a Community, a New Future of Architecture Education, a special report. In 1995, a couple of architects, I believe they received a grant to tour the country and interview different communities. Somehow they ended up in Port Angeles and they interviewed me. And I'm quoted in this book saying, this is 1995, I believe preserving the environment is quickly becoming the larger purpose of architects in the next 10 to 20 years. We have a responsibility to use less and get more. We need to be economical and rethink some of the extravagant ways of our modern predecessors. This is still who I am, which is really exciting. So what to do? We have a choice, and it's like this. If you want someone to care less about community development, it's not going to be me. I've spent the last 30+ years of my career, my professional career, dealing with the complexities of community and development. And to only settle, that's just not good enough. We have to challenge ourselves and we have to keep moving forward. So I'll make you a promise, and that is to continue to listen to you and work tirelessly to make our county its best. And I ask for your vote to continue to serve as your Community Development Director. Thank you.
Thank you both. Let's give a round of applause. We'll take a moment to change positions. The prosecuting attorney candidates will be coming to. Okay, audience, we're going to start. Please take your seats. We'll be following the same format that we used in the previous panel. I remind you that a brief description of the responsibilities of the office are on your agenda. The candidates are the incumbent, Mark Nichols, and the challenger, Selinda Barkhuis. Both candidates, in the order they filed for office, will be given up to 2 minutes for their opening remarks. We've asked the candidates to introduce themselves by covering the following information. What are your qualifications for serving as county prosecuting attorney? Why are you running for this office? And what are your goals for the first year of this term of office? Candidates, keep your eyes on our timers so you can gauge your time. And we'll begin with the incumbent, Mark Nichols. 2 minutes.
Great, good evening. Again, my name is Mark Nichols. I'm your current county prosecuting attorney. I was born and raised in Seattle, obtained my Bachelor of Arts from the University of Washington, certification in law enforcement from Skagit Valley College, and my law degree from Seattle University School of Law. By way of relevant employment background, I have 5 years experience as a commissioned peace officer and have worked in prosecution for 16 years, roughly. I'm actively involved in our community. I'm a member in good standing of Nor'Wester Rotary. I've been involved most recently in a couple of community events involving the annual World Suicide Prevention Day exercise, and I proudly participated for the 3rd year in a row in our annual opioid awareness walk. By way of qualifications, I've run the prosecutor's office for the last 4 years. Prior to that, I served as the chief deputy for a number of years. I got my start as a criminal trial deputy, prosecuting cases ranging from misdemeanors all the way up to Class A felonies. I prosecuted in juvenile and adult courts, and I've also litigated civilly on behalf of the county. I'm running for office again because I believe that serving as prosecutor is the best way for me to make a critical contribution to the public safety effort in Clallam County, which is near and dear to my heart. By way of immediate second-term goals, I'm interested in continuing to aggressively prosecute crime for purposes of keeping you safe, because fundamentally I believe that's what people expect from their county prosecuting attorney. At the same time, I'm very interested in initiating a dialogue with stakeholders from within as well as outside of county government that I hope will result in the establishment of a mental health court in Clallam County. And last but not least, I'm interested in continuing to use the prosecutor's office and the coroner's office in particular to bring voice to the public health and safety threats that accompany the suicide trend that we see developing. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mark. And now we'll hear from Selinda Barkhuis.
My name is Selinda Barkhuis, and I'm running for county prosecutor to pursue justice while restoring trust and fiscal responsibility to the prosecutor's office. I'm qualified for the position of prosecuting attorney because I have 7 years of courtroom experience representing hundreds of clients in each of the county's courtrooms. I have 7 years experience as a senior planner in the county's Department of Community Development, and I have 7 years experience as an elected executive as the twice duly elected county treasurer. Having spent the last 20-some years working on all the floors of the county courthouse, I have a thorough understanding of how Clallam County government works, and more importantly, of how it does not work. It is because of my thorough understanding of how Clallam County government doesn't work that I'm running for prosecutor. As prosecutor, I will be in a position to protect and defend everybody's rights to be treated equally, fairly, and consistently by supporting and defending statutory and constitutional rule of law, all as consistent with my oath of office and my oath as an attorney. To that end, my goals for the first year in office are: 1, immediately upon taking office, I will review all outstanding referrals from the various law enforcement agencies for any cases that, in my opinion, ought to be filed to ensure justice is served. 2, I will terminate all of Mark Nichols' special deputy appointments of private, out-of-county lawyers who have, for years now, been providing stealth legal services for the distinct benefit of Mark Nichols at the distinct expense of your tax dollars and at the distinct expense of your rights. Your rights as taxpayers, your rights as landowners, your rights as litigants in the county's courts, and your rights as county employees. 3, I will make sure that all of the prosecutor's statutory clients, that is your other elected officials, are receiving the legal advice and support that is competent, conflict-free, and above board, and for that matter, consistent with the guidelines and advice of the State Attorney General. And 4, I'll be working alongside my deputies in the courtroom at least 20% of the time. Thank you for your time for being here.
Thank you, candidates. Now we'll take as many questions as possible from you, the audience. We'll follow the same procedures as with our previous panel. Please come to the microphone, state your name, and specify whom your question is for. You will have up to 30 seconds to ask your question. The candidates will be given up to 1 minute to answer each question. Both candidates will have an opportunity to respond to all questions, even those directed to a specific candidate. I'll then give both candidates the opportunity to respond to or rebut their fellow candidates' answers. They'll be given up to 30 seconds for that, or they may waive it. And I hope, again, that we'll be able to hear all your questions. Please keep in mind that we'll give everyone in the audience the chance to ask a question before taking follow-ups or multiple questions from the same person. And again, I'm going to use my prerogative as moderator to ask the first question while you're getting yourselves in line. In this position, and this is for both of you, in this position, you serve as the attorney for the county. What procedures would you follow to address a policy conflict between other elected county officials and the county commissioners? Mark, will begin with you.
Thank you. And so I'll note at the outset that the same question, I believe, was asked, or a variation of a theme, on the vote411.org website. And so I'd refer people there for a more exhaustive answer. But the short answer is that the rules of professional conduct, which are the ethical guidelines that attorneys are required to follow, authorize prosecutors to help mediate disputes, oftentimes which sound in policy disagreements as between elected officials and government. And so I would conduct myself consistent with the guidance provided through the rules of professional conduct, which is first and foremost ethical advice, very important. Attempt to mediate disputes. I would note that disputes within county government that sound in policy are healthy and normal given county's structural form of government. My experience in dealing with disputes within county government on the policy level is that provided people focus on the issue at hand and don't focus so much on the personalities, we can make great progress in resolving those and reaching decisions.
Selinda?
I will provide competent, conflict-free, and above advice to all my statutory clients. If that is that does not resolve the problem, I'm also a certified mediator, so seek to mediate a dispute. But if that does not resolve the problem, then there is a conflict of interest within the office. I would refer the issue to the Attorney General. When I was the treasurer, I have repeatedly requested that one conflict in particular be referred to the Attorney General, and that was refused, as the prosecuting attorney is the only one who can access the Attorney General in that way. I would seek the Attorney General's advice and consultation. I will most definitely not resort to suing my own clients. That would terminate any attorney-client relationship. Obviously, when you start suing your own clients, I find that unbelievable that happened to me. I was threatened with a lawsuit, and I was actually sued by my own lawyer. Thank you.
Mark, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
Certainly, just by way of clarification, the fact of the matter is that the county did file a lawsuit against Ms. Barkhuis. The prosecuting attorney did not. Thank you.
Selinda?
Guns don't shoot by themselves, and lawsuits don't get filed by themselves. It was the county prosecutor whose name is on that lawsuit. It's the county prosecutor who filed that lawsuit. He could have said no to the commissioners, and that is something that perhaps he is not capable of doing, but that needed to be said. He should have said no. I will not sue my own client.
Thank you. Question over there.
Gee, that's a little clarification that I'd like to have. So this is for Selinda and Mark.
Please give your name.
Denetta Retton, Port Angeles. Your rack card and your blog continually state that Mark Nichols sued you. Yet all the county records show Clallam County versus Selinda Barkhuis. Did Clallam County initiate a lawsuit against you?
Selinda, take this first.
Well, Clallam County claimed that had an executive session with the prosecutor, but there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that there was any such executive session. The prosecutor is the one who filed the lawsuit. All the public records that I have, actually, he had 4 deputy prosecutors work together with him on this lawsuit that was filed against me. It most definitely is the lawyer who files the lawsuit. It wasn't anybody in the county commissioner's office. It was the prosecuting attorney's office who filed that lawsuit against me. It was the prosecuting attorney's office who threatened to sue me even before then. No, it was the prosecuting attorney who filed that lawsuit.
Mark?
Yes, so we'll spend a bit more time on this issue. I'll note at the outset it's very important not to confuse the attorney who signs the pleadings with the client who actually directs the filing of the suit. In this case, a simple review of the case caption in the court record reveals that Clallam County, a political subdivision of the state of Washington, sued Ms. Barkhuis. It is true that one of my deputies' names appears on the pleading. Of course, an attorney has to file a suit on behalf of a client, but it's important not to confuse the client with the attorney. Last but not least, I think it's very important to understand why that particular suit was filed, and it stemmed from the fact that Ms. Barkhuis refused to follow the laws of the state of Washington, the guidance provided by our state Supreme Court. Interestingly, in the heels of the Pierce County prosecutor doing the very same thing, which was refusing to turn over public records upon request, which exposed the county and your taxpayers to liability. It's fortunate that the suit was able to be dismissed. It's unfortunate it had to be filed at all. A simple compliance with the law would have alleviated all of that.
Thank you. You have 30 seconds, Linda.
The request was for my personal emails from my personal accounts, my personal computer, political emails to, it was the Portical. I was writing articles for the Portical. If I had sent those emails on my work email, that would have been a violation of the law. I sent these emails because they were political emails. I was whistleblowing. I was sued because it was whistleblowing. If you read the lawsuit, it actually says that the county was seeking to hold me personally liable for records that I was directly providing to the Peninsula Data News. Apparently that is no longer allowed to whistleblow to the newspaper. Did you say stop?
Mark, you have 30 seconds.
Yes, a simple review of Nissen versus Pierce County reveals the process to be followed when a government employee receives a request for public records that are generated on their personal email server. I think we've seen this play out at the national level, actually. You can't shield from public disclosure public records simply by transacting them on your personal email account. There's a very simple process to follow to ensure due process for the government employee, in this case Ms. Barkhuis, and to allow for transparency as to the requester.
Our next question.
I'm Florence Bucherkas, Gwynn, Washington, and this question is for Ms. Barkhuis. Mr. Nichols has been one of the great promoters and put more people in drug court than any other prosecutor. He, talking with Squim Police Department personnel, they are extremely pleased with the changes that he's made with the cities and the arrangements and collaborative work that's gone on there. And he's also proposing a mental health court.
What is your question?
So the question is, what kinds of innovative ideas have you proposed to employ as a prosecutor?
Selinda, do you have a minute?
One of the problems that I'm seeing at the onset is that Mark Nichols actually has entered into, takes credit for the county entering into misdemeanor contracts with the cities that are now proving to be extremely costly to the county because they were predicated on squeezing the poorest among us on the pay and the peer program. Now that that revenue stream has been terminated by the legislature, now the county's in the hole for at least $400,000 a year. Now that is money that is going to, that sort of loss of money is going to be a real problem in moving forward with ideas. So we can have ideas, but first of all, we have to resolve the issue of how we're going to pay for...
I really wanted to know what your ideas were.
My ideas were to work in conjunction with the judiciary. First of all, the mental health court and all the other therapeutic courts, as they're called, they are the prerogative of the judiciary, not the prosecutor. I mean, so the prosecutor can want these things, but unless the judiciary is willing to do them, it is. And so, yes, I would be perfectly willing to work with the judiciary on therapeutic courts, but it has to come from the judiciary.
Mark, you have 1 minute.
So I think the question involved what are some innovative ideas that the candidates have. I started out my remarks this evening by speaking, I believe, to a second-term goal that involves establishing a mental health court in Clallam County. It is true that that's a collaborative effort, and that's my working style is collaborative. So I'm a strong believer that if you look around Clallam County, you don't need to look far to see the need for us to do more with mental health. Under Title II of the RCW, counties are authorized but not required to establish mental health courts, which are a great vehicle because they allow for two systems that traditionally don't work well together, the mental health system and the criminal justice system, to pair their talents, their interests in a way that allows us to provide help for people whose bad conduct is driven not by criminal behavior, but by underlying mental health disorder. That's a true innovative idea. It's something we can accomplish here in Clallam County. I believe we have the resources within the community already. We just need to redirect and have them work in unison to affect that outcome.
Selinda, you have another 30 seconds.
Those are some really good ideas. I'm just wondering why it is that in the last 3.5 years that the incumbent has been in office, he has not made any progress on those. Perhaps he has been busy settling cases, and that have cost the county $2.4 million. That is money that could have been spent on promoting and putting together a lot of really good programs, but he has spent his time and county resources in a manner that has apparently kept him from doing this in his first term. Thank you.
Mark, you have another 30 seconds.
Yes, and so over the last 4 years, we've actually accomplished quite a bit in relation to mental health already. If you look at Clallam County's history prior to about 2014, you would have seen that we were grossly out of compliance as a jurisdiction with the requirements of the state's Involuntary Treatment Act under RCW 71.05. I immediately went to work tasking my office and was personally involved in helping to bring our jurisdiction into compliance with the requirements of the ITA Act. We worked aggressively with PBH, OMC, and stakeholders to accomplish that.
Our next question.
We have three.
Do you have some over there? Okay.
This one may have already been asked, perhaps differently, so I think I'll let you decide whether it should go forward. Please clarify, I'm sorry, this is Melissa Sesson. Please clarify why you think Mark Nichols sued you, since it was the commissioner that mandated him to do so.
I personally think that's been pretty much hashed over, don't you both? Or do you want to? I could give you each a 30-second rebuttal time if you would like.
Sure, I would like to, when it comes down to it, why I got sued is, well, I was whistleblowing documents that showed some serious financial mismanagement, but also at the same time that I was being sued for not for failing to provide records, but for threatening to provide records to the Peninsula Data News. Mr. Nichols was settling the Lane public records case, which, and that was settled for over $500,000, and it was very stealthily settled. These were records that I actually created as senior planner that had been withheld at length, and so I think it was a diversion to keep the attention away from the settlement going through very stealthily, which is why I was sued.
Mark, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'm glad to share source documents with anybody who would like to get to the bottom of this. The fact of the matter is that had Ms. Barkhuis simply generated at the outset what the Supreme Court refers to as an innocent affidavit, the county never would have sued her. We never would have had to expend the resource on starting to litigate that matter. Notably, in the end, she did exactly what the county asked her to do in the beginning. In the end of the process, we expended significant public resource with an elected official who was refusing to simply follow the law. And I think that's the last thing you want in your prosecutor.
We'll take the next question over here.
Hi, Scott Lang, Clallam Bay. This question is for Mark Nichols. Your failure to observe and enforce the laws has cost Clallam County and its insurers over $2 million since you started with the county. Another case, the Hendrickson matter, is pending, and it's my understanding that another suit may be coming soon. You have fired several employees for reasons trivial in comparison to your record. If Ms. Hendrickson should win her case, or the county and its insurers must pay another settlement for your mistakes, will you sue yourself, or will you tender your resignation?
Mark, you have a minute.
So I think I'll take my minute to first correct a couple of factual inaccuracies built within the question. I haven't cost the county $2 million or anything near to it. When the county is sued, and unfortunately in today's day and age, that's a fairly common occurrence. We have a $100,000 deductible that's paid by the county. Amounts above and beyond that, regardless of the suit, wind up getting paid by our insurance company. The same would apply to the city or the state of Washington when it's sued. Moreover, I have actually stabilized the workforce in the office, not gone about firing individuals. And this is a very important point. There has been a cleaning house theory within Clallam County every time a new prosecutor is elected over the last roughly 15 to 20 years. I went about stopping that so we could retain institutional knowledge and have people work for the citizens of the county. Turnover has virtually dropped off in our office and morale is quite high. And in relation to the suit that you've mentioned, those claims were previously investigated, and there's a report that clears me of wrongdoing.
Selinda, you have a minute.
Well, I want to note Mr. Nichols' reference to source documents. He has mentioned source documents that tell a different story than is out there on a number of occasions now, and I've asked for those source documents, but they are not available to me. Now, I have all my source documents online on my website. You can go there and you can read the lawsuit for yourself that I've talked, where I got sued. And I'm really concerned with the fact that Mr. Nichols keeps referring to, oh, if you just talk to me personally, I can show you these documents. Because I'm not even privy to these documents, and this is one thing I want to point out, that that Ms. Nichols has private lawyers, and one of them has been working for him against me for years. And I did a public records request, and I get all of these documents, a couple of thousand of them, highly redacted, that have my name at the top. I'm not allowed to know what Mr. Nichols and his private lawyer, paid for it by your tax dollars, by the way, are discussing that have to do with me for years. So that's what I wanted to say with my minute here.
Mark, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
And so I, in fact, don't have private lawyers working for me to sue Ms. Barkhuis, and moreover, assuming arguendo that I did, if she's conceded that she doesn't know what those lawyers are doing, how can she possibly assert that they're suing her?
Well, this lawyer, Dale Kammerer, was involved in suing me. His emails are part of the public records. These documents all have my name at the top and big black boxes. So yeah, it's hard to say what they've been doing. But I do know I've had a lot of issues at the county and a lot of concerns, and they've all been above the fold on the Peninsula Daily News. All you have to do is go online, put in my name, and you'll have a lot. So anyway, I am concerned about Mr. Nichols' source documents, and so should you be.
Our next question over here.
This is from Marcia Rady, and she's asking both of you, what do you think about prosecuting children 18 years old as adults? Or as both?
For both of them? Well, we'll have Selinda take this one first.
Well, that is unfortunately the law. When you're 18, you are considered an adult and you go to adult court. What do I think of that? I'm not really sure how to answer that question. I mean, it's not a discretionary decision to do that or not to do that. When you're 18 and you're alleged to have committed a crime, then you go to adult court.
Mark?
And so the issue of prosecuting juveniles or young adults as adults has been in the news quite a bit of late. You know, under the state's Juvenile Justice and Care Act, we have what's called the auto-adult provisions. And what those require is that certain individuals who are under the age of 18 who commit serious enough offenses actually wind up being prosecuted as adults. Jurisdiction winds up being divested to the adult court based on the severity of the crime. There's a movement afoot right now, and it's really born out of King County in particular, and it's exploring the question of whether, in relation to the fact that our understanding of the development of the human mind warrants increasing the age of adulthood for purposes of prosecutions. Frankly, in some cases, I would be a strong supporter of that. Specifically in relation to less serious crimes. In relation to more serious crimes, I think that adult court is the appropriate place for them.
Selinda, you have another 30 seconds if you wish to use it. No? Mark, do you wish to say anything else on this?
Certainly. I think what I'll do is just take the 30 seconds to speak to the fact that our understanding of the human brain is really evolving pretty quickly. And many of the laws on the books were crafted decades ago when our understanding was quite a bit more simplistic than it is now. Our understanding of child development, how people go about making decisions is remarkably different. We're learning about adverse childhood experiences, the impact those have on behavior as adults. That's really at the heart of this controversy. It's a good discussion for good public policy reasons and purpose.
Thank you. Next question over there.
Oh, you are, okay. Good evening, my name's Mary Irwin, and I'm from Port Angeles, rural Port Angeles, I guess, Clallam County. My question is actually for both of the candidates. I'd like to know if, both of their opinions on, if they believe that the prosecutor's office or their position should be partisan or not.
Mark, you'll go first on this one.
No. The last thing that Clallam County wants or should want is a partisan prosecutor. It's as a byproduct of state law that the Office of Prosecuting Attorney in county government is partisan. As a result of an Attorney General question I asked a couple of years ago, we now know that because we operate under the charter form of government, we have the ability to place a question before the voters, either at the hand of the Charter Review Commission next time it convenes, or based on a majority vote of the county commissioners, to ask the citizenry whether they would be interested in having the office converted from partisan to nonpartisan. As I've been doorbelling across the county, I've been building this question into my discussion with people on their front doors. Overwhelmingly, people are proponents of converting the office to nonpartisan, and for good reason. At the end of the day, I think people just want a prosecutor who's going to follow the law and work on keeping them safe. That's how I've worked the office. I've never been partisan in my discharge of duties, and I never will be.
Selinda?
I have been nonpartisan my entire political career. I filed as an independent. I'm not a member of the party. I was in a nonpartisan position as the elected treasurer, and I continue to feel strongly about being independent and nonpartisan. That's why I filed that way. I'm very much committed to that. I do believe that justice is blind, and so it is a nonpartisan position. It should be a nonpartisan position.
Do either of you wish to make a further comment on this?
No, thank you.
Okay. Our next question.
Yes, this is from Lisa Decker. It's beginning with Mr. Nichols. It is my understanding that most prosecutors carry their own caseload, using at least 15% of their work time. Why do you not carry your own caseload?
And so I'm not sure where the 15% figure comes from. Regardless, I've worked the position of prosecuting attorney in a different way by design. When I came into office, it was in the aftermath of having worked for a prosecutor, a multi-term prosecutor, who spent probably well north of 90% of her time in court. And that was at the expense of running the office with regards to the budget, the development and implementation of policy, structures that are designed to benefit the workforce so that people can be as efficient as they can in the delivery of service to you. It's also at the expense of public education and outreach, which is something that I purposely prioritized and that I ran on in 2014. Frankly, even as active as I've been in relation to public education and outreach, the response I receive from community groups is, gee, can you come back and talk with us even more? That said, prosecuting cases is fun. It's how I got my start. And for purposes of second term, one of my goals is getting back into court, realistically on about a 25% basis at most.
Selinda?
I don't think prosecuting cases will be fun. I think it is serious business, and it affects people's lives very intimately. I plan on, I have a lot of courtroom experience. I was a lawyer in private practice, practicing family law, criminal defense, public defense for about 7 years. I was in the courtrooms several days a week in various calendars. I plan to spend at least 20% of my time in the criminal courtroom, which is pretty much every Friday, when there are the criminal calendars, as well as any other days that my cases are heard in the courtroom. I think it is important for the prosecutor to be in the courtroom. One, to see what his deputies are experiencing in the courtroom, the issues and challenges that are there, what issues are coming up. And two, because I think it's important for the public to understand that it is the elected prosecutor who's ultimately responsible for who gets charged with what and how cases are disposed of. Thank you.
Do either of you wish to use your additional 30 seconds?
I would like to. And so To be clear, I do spend time in court for a couple of different reasons. Number one, I'm there to support my deputies in relation to some of the more complex cases, and I'm also there for purposes of observing their skill sets so that we can fold feedback into their annual performance evaluations. That's something I'm a strong proponent of. Also, I have been in court practicing as well. Perhaps this has gotten lost in the discussion, but just over the last few months, I've been out in juvenile court covering calendars on Thursday.
Selinda? Nothing else? Okay.
Hi, Rachel Ringer, Clallam County. This is for both of you. How many lawsuits have been filed against you for ageism, sexism, gender discrimination, and sexual harassment? And how much money have you cost the county?
Selinda, we'll take you first on this one.
0 lawsuits and $0.
Mark?
And per the earlier remark, there's been one lawsuit filed against me that alleges sexual harassment that's been in the news a bit. That's based on a longtime friend, former employee of the office, who made some complaints. They were investigated by a third-party, neutral, independent investigator who happened to be a professional woman out of Seattle who specialized in conducting workplace investigations. She took all the time she needed to thoroughly investigate the complaints, speak with whoever she felt was appropriate, ultimately authored an exhaustive report of findings that clears me of wrongdoing. That said, an attorney was hired who's filed a lawsuit, and we're following that process in court. The claimant, to be clear, has every right to file a lawsuit and will simply cooperate with that process.
Selinda, you have 30 seconds if you wish to use it.
Just wanted to remind the incumbent that there was the age and gender discrimination lawsuit that was settled in 2012 for $1.6 million that involved 4 women that were fired from the prosecuting attorney's office for age and gender issues.
Mark, 30 seconds.
True, but that wasn't filed against me, which I think was the source of your question.
Question? Don't argue. She'll hold it.
Well, I want to go back to an answer you made a while back, Mike, where you put off the cost of these lawsuits to the county's insurance company. Isn't it true that the county's insurance company is the Washington County's risk pool? And isn't it true that that is funded by taxpayer dollars?
Mark?
It is true that the county's insurer, for lack of better terms, is the Washington County's risk pool, which is a joint self-insurance group authorized under state law. It was created by counties, for counties, decades ago, recognizing the unique nature of liabilities that attach given the work that we do. The pool is self-funded by the member counties, and there's also layers of excess insurance coverage that are purchased by it in the event of catastrophic liabilities.
What is catastrophic?
I'd point out that 2 lawsuits for sure were not covered by the risk pool, and that is the Delane public records case that was settled over $500,000, and then in addition to that there were attorney's fees and a lot more costs in actually implementing that settlement. But $500,000 was paid from the county reserves. I know I was the county treasurer and I was ordered to liquidate over $500,000 of your taxpayer reserves to pay the settlement on that public records lawsuit, which involved withholding of records for many, many years. The other one is $300,000 in the Fager case that was just in the newspaper. That was for penalties. No, that was for attorney's fees to be paid to the other party because of wrongful misconduct. That was also not paid. That is not going to be paid by the risk pool. That is the cost to the county taxpayers, over $300,000.
Mark, you have 30 seconds additional.
Sure. So with reference to the public record suit that was referenced, that was filed against Clallam County, the Department of Community Development, the Prosecuting Attorney's Office, and John Doe's 1 through 10. It was unfortunate that that happened, especially because as far back as 2008, I, in writing, specifically recommended that the county take more seriously its obligations under the state's Public Records Act. I believe had they simply implemented my recommendations in 2008 instead of 2017, none of that likely would have been necessary.
Selinda?
Well, if you had followed my professional advice that I gave in 2007, which was the key email that had been redacted and withheld from Mr. Lang until 2013, then Mr. Lang never would have had to file his public records lawsuit, and he would never have to file the case against his neighbor. So if you just followed my advice back in 2007, that $500,000 could have been saved to the taxpayers.
Thank you. We have 2 more people that are standing to ask questions, and we'll hear those, and then it will be time to stop. Over there.
Hi, Marilee Smith. I see a pattern here that that actually disturbs me. In 2009, there was that $1.6 million age discrimination suit by 4 women who claimed hostile, demeaning, and condescending atmosphere. And you were deputy prosecutor. This is actually for Mr. Nichols. In 2011, there was a deputy prosecutor hired who had, was found, I guess, there was a lawsuit paid out for sexual harassment in Aberdeen, and then your sexual harassment lawsuit, that whether it's true or not, I have no idea. What are you doing within the Clallam, what would you do, if elected this time, to make sure that women are not harassed in the workplace, and how do you change this tide that I'm seeing?
Mark?
And so just by way of clarification on the 2009 age discrimination suit, that occurred under not my term or administration, but a former prosecuting attorney. Moreover, while the case was settled, I was a proponent of having it go to trial, among other reasons, because the judge in the case found that the plaintiffs willfully and improperly destroyed evidence. And I don't think that anybody likes when people do that. As to an Aberdeen case, different jurisdiction, I had nothing to do with that, and so I couldn't really comment on that. But what I will comment on is the topic of women's rights, and I'm a huge supporter of women's rights. I enjoy prosecuting people who harass women, who violate their rights or subject them to other deprivations as the case may be. If you ask employees of the prosecutor's office, 66% of whom are female, 2/3 of my management team are women, I think they'll echo that sentiment. So I lead by example in that regard.
Selinda?
It's a long-standing history, and for him to deny his involvement in the age and gender discrimination lawsuit, I mean, he was the chief civil deputy at the time. He was in charge of management of his office. His name is all over the letters that fired these women. He is very much was part and parcel of the allegations in that lawsuit, and it's a long-standing history of issues that. The dollars and the lawsuits speak for themselves, I think, in this regard.
Mark, do you wish to rebut?
Briefly, I would just note that the firing decisions were made by a woman. That was former elected prosecuting attorney Deb Kelly. Moreover, she fell within the very same protected class, being over the age of 40, that she was accused of discriminating against. Again, I strongly feel that that case should have been allowed to go to trial. The real problem in settling it, and that was a decision made by the county's insurer, is that it invites frivolous lawsuits against the county.
Selinda, 30 seconds.
I think it is a hallmark of the incumbent to blame others for the situation he finds himself in repeatedly. A refusal to take responsibility and accountability as the elected official. or as the manager at the time, an inability to apparently say, no, I don't agree with this. I mean, we heard that about the age and gender discrimination. Oh, I just signed the letter. We heard that about him suing me. Oh, that was the commissioners. Just my deputy signed the documents. I think that's a problem when you have an elected official refusing to take responsibility for what comes out of his office.
Our last audience question.
Hi, I'm Sandy Goodwin from Avenue, which is between PA and Schwem. My question has to do with mental health with the True Blood settlement. I know I've talked with Cassie Trueblood, who is the public defender who filed the True Blood lawsuit, which Washington is settling right now. And she had said that a critical component that we need to look at in a prosecutor is what they have done with regard to mental health. Not talking about, but recognizing and standing up, going to bat for people, whether they are, accused of a crime. What have you done in your careers that shows that you are tuned in to this issue? Because we've got suicides, we've got a lot of
Time. Selinda, would you take this first?
Yes, when I was in private practice as a lawyer, I mentioned I did public defense. One of the contracts that I had was with the dependency contract, where you represent people and children at times who are involved with social services. And as such, I have a long history of representing people and advocating on behalf of people who have issues, mental health issues at times. Also, I'm a certified guardian ad litem, and I was appointed on a number of cases along the way, some real serious ones, on behalf of people who had needed a guardian ad litem because they could not make decisions directly themselves and thus needed somebody to look out for the best interest in the legal system. So I have a lot of experience in that regard.
Mark?
Yes, and so the question was fairly broad, but I think it touched on mental health and suicide, which kind of go hand in hand. And so I'm a true believer that we need to do more and we need to do better in relation to all things mental health. I believe the criminal courts and the criminal justice system was built to deal first and foremost with people who were criminal actors. They didn't care about others. They made bad decisions that placed them on the far side of the law because they just didn't respect the rights of others. But when we deal with people who are mentally ill, they make decisions, their behavior is driven by an underlying condition. We can't do much within the conventional criminal justice system to really get them help. We can punish their symptomatic behavior, which I think was a bad idea and advances poor public policy outcomes. Or again, if we focus on establishing a mental health court, I think it will allow us to better address resource to getting them help for their underlying problem, the goal of which is to allow them to become lucid and stop making bad decisions like breaking the law.
Do either of you have anything you wish to rebut on this? Okay, then I'm going to use my prerogative to ask one last question because I don't think it was addressed in any of the questions that came from the audience. What does your department do, or should it do, on behalf of the victims of the crimes that you prosecute? Mark, will you take that first?
Yes, I'd be glad to. So in the state of Washington, crime victims actually have a whole host of rights under our state constitution, separate and distinct. They have a series of rights under Titles 7 and 13 of the Revised Code of Washington. Coming into office, I was convinced that the prosecutor's office was not doing everything that it needed to honor those rights. And so I have completely overhauled our victim witness coordinator division, which is staffed with just an outstanding individual who now helps shepherd the provision of crime victims' rights throughout the system. Gone are the days where people learn only after the fact what happened in their case. Now they receive frequent updates regarding substantive developments in their case, assistance in filling out paperwork for restitution, protection orders, assistance in crafting victim impact statements to be read before the court at the time of allocution and referral to wraparound services. We've come a long ways over the last 4 years.
Selinda?
So I would like to make sure, and I want to make sure, that in addition to the services being provided by the prosecuting attorney's office, there are victims' services available independent of the prosecuting attorney's office. I think it is important for victims to have resources that, that are independent of that. So I will make sure that in addition to having victim services in the prosecuting attorney's office, that those services that are available in the community will remain in the community and will not suffer as a result of bringing certain services inside the prosecuting attorney's office.
Roger, do you wish to use your additional 30 seconds?
I would like to briefly. There are victim resources outside of the prosecutor's office in the community. Healthy Families of Clallam County is one notable example. We don't compete against Healthy Families, we work with it. And we look forward to maintaining that collaborative relationship, working forward. There's plenty of work. There's more that can be done, frankly, by the prosecutor's office than can be done by the prosecutor's office and Healthy Family, even if they wanted to try to get everything done. So there's an abundance of need, plenty of opportunity to serve.
We agree on that one.
Okay, thank you all for such broad, insightful, and cutting questions. We'll now go to our candidates' closing statements. And again, we reverse the order from the opening statements. Each will have 2 minutes, and we begin with Selinda Barkhuis.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity to talk to you today about why you should vote for me as your next county prosecutor. What is so important to understand is that the position of prosecutor is among the most powerful of elected offices due to the prosecutor's almost absolute discretionary power to decide what criminal charges to get filed and against whom to pursue civil forfeitures, and as such impact far-reaching professional and financial ramifications, wrongly so if that discretion is abused by, for instance, withholding evidence, disregarding the law, or via threatening or abusive behavior. The fact of the matter is that the incumbent has already cost us $2.4 million in judgment and legal fees for exactly these sorts of issues. How much more is he going to cost us? This year, Clallam County voters have a once-in-a-4-year opportunity to decide who should wield that almost absolute power as prosecuting attorney for the next 4 years. Your choices are the incumbent, champion of expensive lawsuits that call into question his professional judgment as well as his personal boundaries, or yours truly, who according to the incumbent himself is a champion of your rights and who as your duly elected county treasurer successfully restored trust and fiscal responsibility to the treasurer's office. I respectfully ask for your vote so that I can pursue justice while restoring trust and fiscal responsibility to the prosecutor's office. Thank you.
Mark?
Yes, I'd like to start by thanking the League for hosting tonight's forum and also thanking each of you for spending your evening with the candidates asking great questions. This is the year that the citizens of Clallam County are asked to once again select who they would like to have serve as their elected prosecutor for the next 4 years. And I respectfully submit that you should choose me for several reasons. First, I'm trusted by the people you trust. To date, I have over 300 endorsements from across the county. Included within the endorsements are people such as Teresa Marchi. She's the interim county treasurer. Notably, she worked for Ms. Barkhuis for, I think, the better part of a decade, and she has publicly endorsed me. Pam Rushton, county assessor. She's also worked with the two of us. Shuna Riggs, county auditor. She's worked with both of us. And the list goes on and on. I'm also honored to be endorsed by multiple law enforcement guilds, numerous men and women, both active and retired law enforcement from across the county, and a cross-spectrum of citizens from the far left to the far right and everywhere in between, which is exactly how I think it should be. Second, you can count on me to deliver. If you look at what's happened over the last 4 years, we have improved the operation of felony justice significantly. Felony prosecutions are up by over 10%. That translates to safer streets for Clallam County, greater deterrent for felons. As previously mentioned, we've expanded the scope of crime victim services, and we've made the office more transparent than ever before during a time when I think that's needed more than ever before. I'm enthusiastic about my second term goals, which can be found on my campaign website, nicholsforprosecutor.com. And in close, I'd ask for three things. Number one, in today's information age, please take the time to research the candidates with a focus on separating fact from fiction. To that end, I invite you to contact me if you have any questions, and I'm glad to share with you answers to your questions. And last but not least, I respectfully ask for your vote in November. Thank you for coming.
Let's thank them. And again, I hope that you both can remain till the end of the forum if people wish to talk with you directly. Our agenda says that we will begin with the county sheriff's position at 7:50. So that gives us about 8 minutes if you want to stretch your legs, get a drink of water, whatever. All right, here we go. We'll be following the same format that we used in the previous two panels. I again remind you that a brief description of the responsibilities of the office are on your agenda. The candidates are the incumbent, Bill Benedict, and the challenger, Jim McLaughlin. Both candidates, in the order they filed for office, will be given up to 2 minutes for their opening remarks. We've asked the candidates to introduce themselves by covering the following information. What are your qualifications for serving as county sheriff? Why are you running for this office? And what are your goals for the first year of this term of office? Candidates, watch the timers down in front. We'll begin with Bill Benedict. 2 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you, League of Women Voters, for inviting me. My experience is 20 years with Clallam County, 8 years of it as a sergeant and as a deputy, 12 years as sheriff. My education was a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from the University of Michigan and a Master's of Science in Applied Physics from the Naval Postgraduate School. Why am I running? I enjoy it. Why? Again, I think I'm good at it. I've been doing it for 12 years. We brought the department in an incredible distance in those 12 years. I don't have time to hit on everything that I've accomplished in the 12 years. There are some rack cards in the back on your way out. There are a few that are listed. And what makes me good at it? Well, first of all, there's 102 employees, of which I'm one of them. So 101 of them are incredibly gifted, talented, and those employees have really done the work for me. My job as the sheriff and the leader is to nurture them and to provide and support them. Most of the good ideas come from them. Some have come from me, and I'll probably get to them today, and I'm proud of that. My 3 goals. First is disaster preparation. That's a little off the beaten path, but the county commissioners charged the sheriff's office with emergency management about 6 years ago. And we've done wonders with the position. And what I want to do is continue and to prepare us for what we know is going to be an inevitable earthquake at some point. Second is make the jail of an instrument of more positive change. We'll get into it a little bit later, but I instituted a medically assisted treatment for opiate addicts. And the third is to continue with the accreditation, which I began 12 years ago, and our department is now fully accredited. Thank you.
Jim McLaughlin, your opening statement, 2 minutes.
And Vicki, thank you for that introduction, and thank you, League of Women Voters, for inviting me here today. My name is Jim McLaughlin. I'm an average guy in an average town doing average stuff, right? No, not quite. My background takes me a little more extensive than that. I've been an Eagle Scout and Boy Scouts. I've been a rescue swimmer with the Coast Guard. I've been a combat engineer with the Marine Corps. I've been in places where most people don't want to go and done things that people don't want to do, either in the water, on the land, on a cliff, in a burning boat, or areas like that. After my Coast Guard career, I went to work in law enforcement. I worked at the jail for 11 months. I worked on patrol for 7 years, and I worked as a detective for 5 years. I've got a background in law enforcement. I've got a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice Administration that I acquired during my employment in the various areas. I've been active in our outreach community lately. We're planning an outreach event here in a few weeks that keep your eyes on the internet for invites to it. My one-year plan is going to turn a 4-year plan, but we'll start with 1 year. It's going to start with proactive policing, introducing proactive policing into the Clallam County Sheriff's Office. Quick example, you go to a deputy, you tell them that your best friend was assaulted last night. What does the deputy tell you? He tells you to have that person come in and file a complaint themselves because the person has to complain themselves. A proactive deputy would tell you, let's go talk to your friend and find out what happened. I have a crime reduction plan. I actually have a plan that I believe will work, and it will work in collaboration with the other local agencies in our county, SWIM and Port Angeles and Forks. I believe in taking better care of victims of violence, domestic violence. I've got plans for how to mitigate the trauma, the emotional and mental trauma on victims of violence. I believe in setting positive role models. I think deputies can make awesome positive role models if given the opportunity, the right place, right time. I did it when I was a deputy. I believe it can still be done. Mitigate shorthanded patrol teams. And I've been given a sign to stop, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go on to the questions from the audience. Is there anyone out there who wasn't here for the previous panels? Well, good. Then I don't have to go through all of the rules again. You know them. Okay. We have microphones on both sides. Your question, 30 seconds limit. State your name first. The candidates will have up to 1 minute to answer each question. Both candidates can answer any question, even if it's directed at only one of them. And then I'll also give them the opportunity to rebut or comment further for another 30 seconds after the first responses. Again, I hope we'll hear all your questions, but we are committed to get out of here at 8:30, so keep that in mind. No second timers at the asking questions. Ask one question, and then only if we have lots of spare time will you have an opportunity to ask a second one. Again, I'm using my prerogative though while you're starting to line up, and I'm going to ask a very broad question because I'm just interested in how you will respond. And Bill, as current sheriff, I'll have you answer it first. How safe is Clallam County?
That's a broad question. Clallam County is incredibly safe. If you want to compare our crime rates with the rest of the state, there's a website you can go to, waspic.org. In general, the long-term crime trends in the state of Washington, Clallam County, and the country in general has been a decline in violent crime, a decline in felony crimes against persons. Property crime has also decreased, although in the last 5 years it has plateaued and somewhat gone up and down during that period. In Clallam County, stranger-initiated violent crime is all but unheard of. Almost all of our violent crime is between people that know each other. That's not a good thing in and of itself, but it is a good thing that you are safe in this county from violence from strangers.
Jim?
I would agree. Clallam County is a very safe county. You can go anywhere in this county. You can walk freely. You can feel comfortable and feel safe here. I think our biggest issue, and I don't want to throw it out there as a threat to people, but property crimes are probably the only thing we really need to worry about here. As my opponent said, violent crimes aren't a big issue in the Olympic Peninsula, but property crimes are, and I encourage people to take care of yourselves, to lock your doors, to not just lock your doors, but Think of other things, whether it's motion sensing lights, cameras. I have a trail camera on my house, on my driveway, and I certainly encourage other people to minimize any potential trespassing or burglary issues. It's just amazing how many successful cases we've had prosecuted when we have pictures of somebody committing a crime. It just helps a whole lot. Not that I want it to happen to anybody, but you know, nobody plans to be a victim. Nobody plans on somebody breaking in their home or their car. It's kind of like an accident, and it happens, but we can prepare for it a little bit better. But it's not a major issue.
Bill, you have another 30 seconds if you wish to use it.
I think that's an awesome lead-in into an accomplishment that I can't take all the credit for, but I came up with some of the initiating ideas for neighborhood watches shortly after I was elected 12 years ago. And we went from 20 neighborhood watches in the unincorporated county, which were in various states of disrepair, to over 106 neighborhood watches right now that are very active. And as a matter of fact, 3 or 4 times a month I am out talking to them. The best way is for citizens to help each other out, watch, and not be a victim of crime.
Jim, you have another 30 seconds.
You know, I'll piggyback on that. Watch your neighbors. Talk to your neighbors. Go next door and talk to who lives there. Go down the road. Block watch party. You know, we used to have block parties in some of the urban areas. We don't have it so much around here, but get to know your neighbor, your immediate neighbors. A lot of cases, again, have been resolved by neighbors watching out for each other. People find out the neighbors have been broke into when a neighbor sees a door open, but they know their neighbor's gone. I certainly advocate for neighbors talking to neighbors. Absolutely.
Question over here.
Rachel Ringer from Clallam County. The Port Angeles Police Department carries naloxone, or known as Narcan, and they've found a way to protect the identity of the people whom they use it upon. Why doesn't the sheriff and deputies carry Narcan? And when elected, will you have the staff trained, and will you begin carrying Narcan?
Were you addressing this to a specific? Okay. Jim, we'll start with you on this one.
Okay. I can't speak to why or if they carry it now. I don't work there, so I can't address that. But if I was elected, I'm a big advocate of saving lives, people. My history shows you lives are important to me. I jumped out of helicopters and rescued people, and it didn't matter who they were. That's what we do. That's what I do. And to me, saving lives, if it's saving an overdose life, then I want the deputies to do it. I want them to have the tools. I want them to have the training. I want them to have the ability. I would require them to do it. I would impose it on the deputies, barring any type of legal roadblock.
Bill?
Presently, it's a decision that's based on response times. And an analysis that we did, first of all, Narcan is expensive. It's $200 a dose. It expires in about a year. It would cost me $4,000 to $6,000 a year. An analysis was done, and we have never in the unincorporated county been first responders to someone who is in opiate distress. The way our medics are distributed throughout this county, the medics almost always beat us. And I should say they always beat us in the case of opiate distress. This isn't to say, and I'm talking with our health officer now, if the price of Narcan goes down and it becomes more readily available, I would certainly entertain doing that. It is carried by our drug task force detectives. They're out in the field, and it's either for their own protection or with some of the people they deal with. But as I said, the case for it is I certainly believe in it, but it doesn't make economic sense to spend $5,000 or $6,000 a year on an event that hasn't happened yet in the unincorporated county.
Jim, 30 seconds if you wish to add.
Yeah, I would argue a little bit that I have been doing CPR when the medics got there and they distributed Narcan and the person woke up. I've seen it in the unincorporated part of the county. I know it happens. Whether it happens a whole lot or not, enough to justify the cost, to me it doesn't matter. A life is worth saving. Any life is worth saving. And if that's the expense of saving one life throughout the year, then that's the expense of saving one life.
Bill, you have another 30 seconds if you wish to use it.
I'd want to know the details of that, Jim. It never came to my attention. And the other part of that too is that in the event that someone is there performing CPR until the medics get there, that's a very viable way of keeping someone until the Narcan does kick in. But as I said, if it is, I am not aware, and I'm in pretty close contact with what we're doing of a situation like you just put out.
Thank you. Question?
Ed Bowen, Rural 3rd District, and this is, I'm hoping both candidates know my topic. If not, I apologize, and I'm pretty confident the sheriff does. And this is to meet coverage gaps with our law enforcement. That's the purpose of this question. The county entered into an agreement sometime back with Olympic National Park for what I call cross-jurisdictional support. How do you think that has gone since that agreement's been instituted? And if you have seen any areas that there's need for improvements or suggested improvements to that, bridging what I call the gap of law enforcement coverage.
Bill, will you take this first?
I will. Actually, I'm going to express a little surprise because are you sure you're not talking Olympic National Forest?
No, this is the national park.
Okay, the national park is exclusive federal jurisdiction. And we used to be cross-commissioned with the national park. We no longer are. They canceled that because they don't want us in there. They're more than willing to have us, they'll bring us warrants or stuff. But for example, right now, we can't even write a speeding ticket, nor can we stop a DUI on Lake Crescent Road because it is exclusive federal jurisdiction. I have an awesome relationship with Chief Jay Shields. We work together, but the Sheriff's Office as well as other law enforcement agencies that are non-federal are not permitted to do law enforcement in the park. So, sorry.
Jim, 1 minute.
Well, I don't know if I can talk any more on that. It doesn't exist between the park and the Sheriff's Office. I'm not sure if that was your question, though, or if you were questioning coverage.
I'm concerned about coverage, and I was hoping that was in place where this agreement to allow the park to assist the sheriff and the sheriff allowed to assist the park.
Yeah, to my knowledge, there's no mutual agreement. I mean, there is a mutual agreement. We back each other and help each other. But as far as taking authority on cases, there's not cross-jurisdictional issues.
Bill?
Yeah, I would add that we certainly back each other, and we go into the national park when they have problems. We back them up. As a matter of fact, in the night we share the same dispatch frequency, and during the day it's available to us. So they would certainly be willing to help us, but as a routine basis of handling cases and making arrests, no.
Do you have anything else to say, Jim?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Question?
Moises Aaron, Port Angeles resident. On March 27, 2018, there was a letter in the PDN in the section on public comments, the commentaries. This particular individual actually, it's a very positive letter. She praises the work done by the Sheriff's Office in one particular program. And I will just read you, it's a short one. I have often, the particular program is the chain gang volunteers and the work they do in cleaning up our roadways and other tasks. She says, I have often wondered about Clallam County's use of the archaic word and if they really were a chain gang. I'm glad to see they are not, and I think it would behoove the county to reconsider calling it that.
What is your question?
My question is, I have thought of that same issue. If you are elected, and either of you, what are your thoughts on this question the resident poses, and would you consider a different word that doesn't sound so archaic and mean-spirited? Thank you.
Jim, would you take that one first? Should the chain gang be called the chain gang? Is that essentially it? Okay.
Oh. You know, I would, yes, I would agree that it should be called a chain gang, because it needs to have, chain gang gives some type of dark, dirty, it's work, it's labor, it's going to take more than, it's going to be something more than just a pleasant day out in the sun. And I think the chain gang should be more than a pleasant day out in the sun. And if you've watched them out in the field, they work hard, and they're guided hard, and they're guarded hard, and they go through a lot to be on chain gang. That's no small. Personally, I would not want to be on the chain gang, because every time they come back inside, they have to get strip searched, and let me tell you, that is not fun. It's not fun to participate in on either side. but that's something that chain gang has to deal with. But I think the chain gang moniker is appropriate.
Bill?
That's an interesting topic, and I do recall that. I don't think that the chain gang has the negative connotations that you're alluding to. It's a very popular program. I will say this, it isn't a true chain gang. The inmates are not chained. As a matter of fact, about 2 months ago, I told them to take the chains off. And the point is that the chains that they did have were just kind of leg chains that would make it difficult to run. We screen those inmates very carefully. We don't allow inmates that are in for violent crimes or who have escaped on their record to do it. They volunteer, and as a matter of fact, that's probably one of the best programs I've got running in the jail. I've met so many people who have told me, you know, for the first time I had to get up early in the morning, I had a breakfast, and I went out and I worked for 10 hours. A lot of those people that had that experience are out in the workforce right now. So I know that's off the topic, but the chain gang nomenclature is still pretty popular. But just between you and me, there aren't any chains.
Jim, would you like to add anything? 30 seconds.
That's a new change to the chain gang that obviously just came up in the last couple of months. I wasn't aware of taking the chains off the chain gang, but I can remember seeing them walk out from the jail to the chain gang van, wearing their chains out there, and feeling that was appropriate because they are still inmates in the jail and they need to be controlled. It's not very often a chain gang person runs away. It has happened in the past, but it's been a few years. I've been long enough where I don't think, like my opponent, it's probably not a big concern here because they do screen the inmates.
Bill, 30 seconds.
No, I do want to add this because it's kind of interesting. We've had one chain gang escape, and that was, oh gosh, 7 or 8, maybe 9 years ago, and someone that ran off a work detail in the forest, and we just happened to have a Coast Guard helicopter that was up in the air, and we called them to come look, and within 10 minutes, the inmate was trying to surrender to the helicopter.
Question?
Hi, good evening. I'm Amy Miller, and I am curious to hear from both the candidates on how they plan to manage and address the increasing mental health and substance use of your inmates.
Bill, will you take this one first?
Yeah, as I alluded in my opening remarks, and I normally give the credit out, but this was actually my own idea. I went to a opiate conference and I had what you might call an epiphany, and I realized that trying to treat opiate addicts through abstinence didn't work. So we were the first jail in the state of Washington to actually start that medically assisted treatment. We're still doing it. We're showing, I think, around a 50% success rate. Numbers are a little early. We had 0 success rate before. The fact is, if somebody's hooked on opiates and they come and they serve the term in the jail, when they get out, the first thing they're going to do is go find some heroin. That's just the way it is. We're at least interrupting that. That I'm very proud of, and that's ongoing. Mental health, I've always been concerned in. About 6 years ago, I arranged to have a full-time mental health professional counselor work in the jail. I'm still doing that, and it's, well, I'll finish that my next chance.
Jim?
Mental health and drug abuse. I think it's kind of hard to argue with my opponent because they do have a good program going on in the jail. And I think our future is going to be enlisting organizations. Where are you, Amy? very similar to yours. I love what you're doing with PAPD. I think that's great. I'd like to see that kind of thing expanded. I think where we're going to end up going in the future, we're going to have a lot of issues in the jail, a lot of people to work with, but working with some of the local outreach agencies, some of the local organizations such as VMO, such as Taffy, Serenity House, we have so many in our community now. I think it's going to be important to link them up with people in the jail who get identified as having drug abuse problems or mental health problems. It's a follow-up afterwards, after they're out of jail, that's going to be important, just as important as how we treat them while they're in the jail. I know PBH, Peninsula Behavioral Health, has cut some funding, so they don't have everything they had available before. But training, education, there's a lot we can do in the future to mitigate problems with mental health and drug abuse.
Bill, you can use it.
Okay, I can finish up. We always say, everyone says, the jail is not the place for people that are mentally ill. I get that. That's no truer statement was ever stated. But in the world we live in, that's what we have. So instead of saying it's somebody else's problem, I'm embracing it. I wish we had mental hospitals. I really do. I wish that we could get people into Western, but I can't. And we're doing an awful lot, and as Jim alluded, we're already all over that. I call that last mile. When someone is discharged, we get them to a clinic, we get them their prescriptions, and we keep them on the drugs, or for mental health, we hook them up with someone that can help them.
Jim, any further?
Well, yeah, a little bit. Without the great resources that we had decades ago to lock people up with mental health problems, that's not what we want to do. We want to adjust our community to where they can fit in it, and we can fit in with them. And that's going to take, I firmly believe, local outreach organizations, local businesses, local volunteers, local people putting their heads together and coming up with solutions and meeting these people halfway. I mean, you can watch on the internet how some of the things happen downtown with people who have mental health issues. They need taken care of. They need supervision. They need us to provide them with some resources. And giving them those resources is what's going to be important in the future.
Next question. Bertha Cooper from Squib. As you mentioned, most violence is not stranger violence, it's person to person. And I would like to hear your comments on violent sexual issues in our county. What is the prevalence? What does the Office of the Sheriff, how do you handle what you handle? And how would you propose to improve it in the future, if you feel improvement is needed? Jim, will you take this first?
Well, that's a pretty complex question, and I appreciate that question. I really appreciate it because I worked a lot of those cases while I was a detective. And I know we work very closely with healthy families, with getting people guidance and assistance afterwards. I think a big part of my plan is how to mitigate emotional and mental trauma with victims of violence, whether it's domestic violence or any violence. After a person has been victimized, they go through a lot of emotional and mental trauma just as much as they went through the physical trauma. And I think deputies can mitigate some of that by giving them a little more time, a little more attention, making a few more phone calls, calling healthy families if that's the case, giving them a ride to a hospital, presuming it doesn't need an ambulance kind of thing. Or arranging for family members to be here or there. But I think there are things that we can do to mitigate a lot of the extraneous, what I'll call extraneous trauma from those incidences. And after they go through patrol, they get down to the detectives, and then detectives follow up on that, and they should be continuing that care to mitigate the emotional trauma.
Bill, 1 minute.
Good question, Bertha, and it is incredibly difficult for police to try to be out in front of this. In other words, we can't really prevent it. It's there's a lot of social factors that lead to domestic violence. Something that we switched to, and Jim alludes to this, but we went to this after he left. We went to trauma-informed investigation and prosecution of sexually violent crimes. It kind of centers the victim. The victim is well taken care of. We work a lot with healthy families. Sometimes we'll actually prosecute where a victim of violence, domestic violence, doesn't want to be a willing victim. That's a tough thing to do, but our experience has shown us that sometimes that we need to intervene hard because we know we're going to be back, and if we come back, the injuries may be even more severe.
Jim, do you wish to use another 30 seconds?
No, I think we've covered that.
Okay. Anything else, Bill?
No, but I do want to say this is that, and I'm sure the audience here understands this, but I want to avoid mission creep. And law enforcement has some very specific roles in our society, and when it comes to sexual violence and whatnot, there are a lot of other factors that go into preventing it. And I'm not sure, I wish there was things that I could do as a sheriff to stop that. But I think it has to do within our education system, our social system, and I'll leave it at that. But that's a great question, Bertha.
Next question?
Yes, I'm going to ask one question and then we'll go to other questions. This is for Jim. Which current programs or practices in the Sheriff's Office do you find need correcting? And outline the specific changes you would make to improve them. And this is from Ron Peregrine.
The specific program, we probably don't have enough time here tonight to go through all the programs that I feel should be changed. But let's look at providing adequate patrol. I don't believe that we provide enough patrol deputies out there. I think we're short. We haven't, in 22 years, we haven't added any deputies to the field, but our population has grown by 6,500 people. I think that's a very significant area that needs improvement. I think there's some investigation aspects that need improvement. Some of the sexual assault cases, I was told about a deputy who met a victim, a rape victim at the hospital, and told her that the sheriff's office doesn't pay for rape kits. That's something that doesn't need to be presented then. That's a training issue. It's an education issue. That's a deputy. But what I'm afraid of is if one deputy says that, then maybe other deputies don't know it either. So there needs to be some more training, some more updating, and making sure that the deputies that respond to all these cases are familiar with them. We teach a lot at the academy. We teach a lot on FTO, but there's always a little bit more, always another thing that deputies can learn, deputies can get trained in, just to make that care a little better.
Bill, you have 1 minute.
Well, that anecdote upsets me because I would investigate it if I knew when, where, and how. Not necessarily to punish someone, but I can't believe that a deputy would be informed that people buy their own rape kits. For one thing, nobody buys them. The sheriff doesn't buy them. The hospitals, they're provided, but hospitals have rape kits. And for a deputy to say that they'd have to buy their own or that they can't afford it is, I think it's specious. I'm not doubting what Jim is saying, but I have issues with that. Certainly, certainly we can always do better in terms of training, and we talk about programs. There are in-service requirements that we have to meet as part of our accreditation, and we do hit on that very heavily. I would finally add that we handle, in the last few years, 26,000 to 27,000 cases a year. The vast majority of them we get absolutely right. In fact, I get hundreds of telephone calls and letters each year on what good jobs my deputies do. One or two might get it wrong, and I apologize for them, but our success rate is 99.999%.
Do either of you wish to state more, or shall we move on to our other questions since time is getting pretty short?
We'll move on.
Okay. Next question? No, we will take that.
My name's Norma Turner. I'm going to ask a question I've asked before. It's a big picture question where you said earlier, Bill, that we don't have a lot of crime in this county. We only have 70,000 people, but we have 14 different agencies that have law enforcement capacity. So they all have things in common. The main thing is they're all paid by taxpayers. So I'm wondering, at what point do we get out of our silos and say, how can we have a more coordinated effort? Why do we have 3 police departments and a county sheriff and Homeland Security and blah, blah, blah? Isn't there some way that they can consolidate? Yeah, for non-violent county, I think consolidation sounds pretty good.
Bill, would you take that?
That's great, Norma, and you know, you're dead on right, and I use that to refute what Jim has said, that we need more deputies. I don't believe we need more deputies. I've studied it, and the fact is that the silo mentality is something that I ran against the incumbent 12 years ago when I was elected, because we had agencies that didn't talk to each other. They took great pride at the end of the city limit. That was the end of their jurisdiction, and the county took over. Since then, we have a number of formal agreements with all of the law enforcement agencies that we cooperate together. When there's a big incident, we pool our resources. In fact, there was an active shooter a while back, and people noticed on the front page of the paper there was a Coast Guard guy there that was doing security. We had some Border Patrol there. They had a SQUIM detective and a Port Angeles detective. What I say to you, Norma, is that we're not going to consolidate anytime soon until counties and cities go bankrupt. But we can. I think what we can do is we can cut down on the growth through cooperating, which is what I'm a huge advocate for. Thank you.
Jim, 1 minute.
Well, I'm sure you understand that all the agencies have their own jurisdiction, and each jurisdiction wants to have their own senior law enforcement agency. Forts wants their own agency. They want their own jail. They want their own police department. SQUIM, same thing. Port Angeles, and of course, we have to cover the unincorporated parts of the county, so we have the sheriff's office. The other agencies, the federal agencies, I'm not sure why they're all here, what they're doing, but they are here, and here they work, and here we work with them. They do come in very handy for some of these major things that we run across as backup units, or even getting there ahead of time. I believe that we can all work together. We have worked together. I've worked with people from every agency in this county, and agencies outside of this county, and agencies outside of the state. But I believe that is the critical factor with having so many agencies, is that they are able to work together. So if somebody has a need, they can express it to other agencies, share the consequences of those needs.
Unless you strongly object, I'm just going to go on to these other questions so that you can. Okay, over there.
Susan Mullen from SQUIM, and actually I wish I'd asked this question to all 3 panels, although it puts the incumbent at an advantage, I think, but all of these 3 run large departments. This takes a lot of managerial skill. And I'd really like to know from each of you what you feel your strengths are, what your experience has been in that regard, and you know, how you see that you can improve the current situations if you feel like they need improvement.
Jim, we'll start with you first on this one.
As far as my qualifications were, having a degree in criminal justice, justice administration, military background. I was a chief in the Coast Guard. I led 12 aviation survival rescue swimmers. Type A personalities, and they were quite a group of people to work with. I enjoyed leading them, I inspired them, and we did a lot of successful things with the Coast Guard. One of my prevailing themes is that we don't say no. We don't tell you that we're not going to do it. We may explain what is in the way, but this is who Jim is. This is what would happen if you got a question and you want something resolved. Let's sit down and talk about how we're going to resolve it. I don't want to give you excuses about how we can't or why we can't. If there's roadblocks in the way, then let's analyze them. Let's talk about them. But if there's a solution, let's find it. But I think between military, law enforcement, and leadership, and I mean Boy Scout, there's so much of it. But for my background, it's a small scale. I've never led a 100-person department before, but I've led some very important, very valuable people.
Bill?
Thank you. I think what prepared me to be sheriff was, in a prior career, I was a naval officer. I was a naval flight officer. I flew fighters off carriers for 22 years. And those duties, including commanding a squadron, and it seemed like I never had less than 50 or 100 or even 200 people that were responsible. And my theory on leadership is this, is that it's almost a servant leader type thing. My job as the leader is not to micromanage 102 employees. My job is to hire the right people, inspire them, give them the tools they need to do the jobs that they need to do. I really, really strive to hire local people. And I'm so proud that most of our officers and employees grew up in Sequim, Port Angeles, Forks, in this area. They're invested in the community. So it's not my job. I don't sit in my office and say, I want you to do this, 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 and this. I say, what can I get you to so you can do your job better? And I think that's the mark of a good leader.
Thank you. The last question.
I have two.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just the one that's up there.
I'm Matt Miller. I'm from here in Port Angeles. For both of you, there was in the Clallam County Jail a couple months back an inmate committed suicide by hanging. I'm curious if each of you thought this death was avoidable, and probably more importantly, what either of you would suggest to avoid it happening again in the future.
Bill, will you take this first?
A suicide is a tragic event, and this was really tragic. I'm not sure what could have been done. The protocol that we have in the jail, in this case, I'll talk a little bit about it, is that when people are admitted to jail, they're screened. They're screened medically, they're screened psychologically. We look for, and we have crisis cells for persons who are either showing signs of mental illness or who express ideations of harming themselves. We've prevented many suicides, but the problem with this one, and I can't go too much into it, there may be some litigation coming in that, but it was really a strange setup. She was in a cell with 3 other cellmates, and none of the cellmates saw anything other than some depression, and she was able to do this. It's unfortunately it's on camera, but it's not a monitored camera. It shocked us. So the answer is I'm not sure there's anything we could have done. There have been many, many suicides that we have prevented in the past, but until we can get some staffing, that if that's a priority, it's going to be difficult to prevent all suicides in the jail.
Jim?
Again, it's hard to argue that. Suicides are hard to determine. People don't come up and say, hey, I'm going to kill myself tonight, and then go do it. It just doesn't happen that way. It's usually a surprise, and perhaps a lot of people weren't even expecting it. Even in jail, where people are in confined areas with each other, if somebody has those ideas, they may not talk about it, they may not give any hints towards it, so there's no way to prevent that person from doing it. Now, some things that may be able to mitigate those chances and those opportunities are things that occupy time in jail. As we know, when you're in jail, there's not a lot to do. You sit in a room, you sit in a chair, you watch TV, you watch what other people want to watch if you're watching TV. So there's a lot of boredom that gives people time to think about, well, maybe this boredom just isn't worth it, or whatever compels them, whatever motivates them. But maybe something along the lines of finding things for inmates to do while they're in jail.
Thank you. That's where we're going to draw an end to the questions. We'll go to our candidates' closing statements, and then before we thank them, I don't want you to escape because the League has some important information to share with you. So save your applause for them until after I've done giving you that information. Okay, closing statements. We go in the reverse of the opening statements. You have 2 minutes, and Jim McLaughlin, you'll go first.
Out front is my little card. It has background information on me. It has my mission statement on the front, and on the back it has information about my background and what I want to do as sheriff. I read to you some of those things on. I didn't want to occupy my closing statements with a lot about me. What I wanted to talk to you about, what I want everybody to think about, is something that my opponent said recently. I'm going to quote him, and this came from him. Back last Friday, we had a morning meeting with some people at Northwest Rotary, and the question came up, or the topic came up, talking about funding more deputies. And what my opponent brought up was that when I said that my idea is maybe reprioritizing different programs to come up with enough money for deputies, he compared it to rearranging chairs on the Titanic. I'm not exactly sure what he meant by Titanic, but come Monday we had another debate, and what I heard in the same type of conversation is that in 5 years, our deputies are going to be task saturated. Now, what I'm hearing from this is, I mean, to me, it's kind of impending doom, which will come about at the end of his next term. I don't know what all these little comments about the Titanic and task saturating deputies, but like I say, I don't believe we have enough deputies out on the road. I believe we need to put more out there. We can backfill. We can provide the times. Right now, between 3 and 7, there are times when it's not unusual to see no deputy on duty. I want to end that. I want deputies on duty during that time, at least one. Same thing for full patrols. We have 4 deputies and a sergeant assigned to our patrols. So if 2 people are gone, you're down to 3 people covering from Crescent Lake to Diamond Point. Now, they do have the backup of the other agencies, but we end up, if we're occupied, if our guys are occupied somewhere, our guys and girls are occupied somewhere, then they're going to have to depend on another agency to take those calls. I do not support that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for coming. Real quickly, the Titanic reference had absolutely nothing to do with staffing. It had to do with funding of the criminal justice system, and it was a question that was related to should the state be paying more of it, or should we cancel programs so we can pay for our courts? So it had nothing to do with staffing. In closing, thank you for coming here. It's been my sincere pleasure to serve as your sheriff for the last 12 years. I ask for your vote for 4 more. I would like to point out that in terms of endorsements, I've been endorsed by both the Democratic Party of Clallam County and the Republican Party of Clallam County. I'm very proud of the fact that the sheriff office is a nonpartisan, and apparently both major political parties think I've been doing a good job and want to return me. I've also been endorsed by retired Police Chief Terry Gallagher of Port Angeles, retired Chief Tom Rippey of Port Angeles, retired Swim Police Chief Bill Dickinson, and former Police Chief Bob Spinks. I've also been endorsed by some 400 or 500 other citizens that signed an endorsement form during the fair. My passion is public safety. My passion is leading an incredibly talented and gifted group of Clallam County citizens who are also employees of the Sheriff's Office. I would add that that group of employees includes everything from deputies, both corrections and patrol deputies. It includes doctors, nurses. I have doctors and nurses that work for me, record specialists, and it includes an incredibly talented command staff who are all dedicated for public safety. Thank you, and I ask for your vote again.
We're going to hold off on our applause until the end. Before we close, I'd like to invite any candidates who are running for other offices that are in the audience to stand, state your name and the office you're running for. I see one.
I'm Suzanne Hayden, and I'm running for a district court judge here in Port Angeles.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. On behalf of the...
Wait.
Oh, there you are.
So Mike Doherty, I'm running for county commissioner in the 3rd district, and because of the charter change, only 3rd district residents get to vote in the general election. A lot of people don't realize that, but I appreciate your support. Thanks.
I want to thank the candidates for running for office and for appearing here this evening. I want to thank our timers, and I want to thank you, the audience, for your informed questions. Remember, ballots will be mailed on Wednesday, October 17th, and your marked ballot must be placed in a drop box or postmarked no later than November 6th. Ballots now have prepaid postage, so voters do not need to apply a stamp. Please remind your family, friends, neighbors to cast their votes as well. For those unable to be at this forum, Tell them that it can be viewed on our league website. For those who have moved since the last election or who need to register, the last day to register online or by mail is Tuesday, October 9th. Monday, October 29th is the last day to register in person at the Clallam County Auditor's Office. I want to also remind you that the League is sponsoring 3 additional forums on October 16th, 17th, and 18th. And you can get information about that from the League table, or it was in yesterday's paper. Also, are you aware that voter turnout at the August primary in Clallam County was less than 50% of the registered voters? I think that's appalling, and I hope you all do too. We all have an equal voice, but only if we vote. I also want to tell you that the League of Women Voters of Washington State has developed a new resource that will help voters make important ballot decisions. Vote411.org is a nonpartisan online voter guide that offers balanced and relevant information on candidates and issues on voters' ballots. All candidates have been encouraged to post their answers to questions on issues facing their local communities. You can pick up Vote411.org bookmarks out on the league table, and it's really simple to use. All you do on your computer or whatever device you use, type in www.vote411.org, and a screen comes up. It asks you to put in your address, and then it automatically brings up everything that will be on your ballot. So you're not having to monkey around looking for things. It all comes to you. Please do visit our membership table and consider joining our organization. Donations are also very welcome, as that's what finances our ability to continue to give these forums for you. Thank you so much. Thank you to our sheriff's candidates.